those that can join on on Teams, you can join on Teams. So share your Teams link, share the YouTube link, retweet. Let's get more people. Yeah, good morning once again. I welcome us all to this month's edition of Fabric Meetup, where we will share our experiences and learn together as far as Microsoft Fabric is concerned. So this month we are going to be focusing mainly on how to prepare for the DP600 certification exam, which is the Fabric Analytic exam. As you can see on my screen already, that's what's going to be focused on our conversation. So last week I sat for the exam myself, and I think that gave me more authority, if there's anything like that, to talk about how to prepare and pass this certification exam. So I have actually put together all the resources that I used. Let me just say 90% of them I used for this for preparation for this exam, and all the resources I can lay my hands upon. So I'll be dropping the link on the chat for us, for those that are on Zoom, for those that are also on YouTube. I'll be sharing the GitHub repository where I have the resource link just in the comment section. So let's just follow along, and feel free to actually stop me at any point if you have any question you want to ask about Microsoft Fabric as far as the exam is concerned, or anything as far as Microsoft Fabric is concerned. So are we together, please? So yeah, so
Yes, we are.
thank you. So on my GitHub, I had actually created this exam preparation materials. So on that GitHub, I have quite a number of materials that I used myself. So first off is I have the career page where you have everything as far as building a career around Microsoft Fabric is concerned. So I'll open that career page now, and then you can see all the career that you can actually delve into the into Microsoft Fabric. But before I continue, let me just quickly drop the link to the repository in the chat on Teams so that we can actually see the resource that is available to us. So I just dropped the link on Teams. So just check that repository, and as time goes on, if I come across more resources, I'll be adding and updating to that GitHub repository. So on that GitHub repository, you have all the links and all the materials that I've used. So let's go back to our discourse today. So basically, I on this repository, I have tried to categorize all the resources that I use. Some I call them the official documentations as provided by Microsoft. And interestingly, people don't know that there are so many sites um, to get documentation for Microsoft, though some of them are overlapping, but we still have some of them where they go into detail in some aspects than the other. And then in some aspects, they actually just didn't talk about some parts. So I know that why it might be a lot. And another thing I've tried to do is that I made as much as possible resource available so that some resource may not actually sync with us. Some people relate with some materials or with some instructor better than the other. So that's why I've made as much as possible. So I have the official documentation. I have about 4 routes to get the official documentation, which is the learning parts, cloud challenge, Microsoft Learn modules, and then the official product documentation, which is the most comprehensive one. And we also have the section where I call study guide and assessment, where you have the study guide, just like in the university, you always have a syllabus for any exam you are preparing for. So this study guide generally gives us a context into how and what you should know when you are preparing for the exam. We are going to look at each and every one of them one after the other. And then we also have the official practice assessment. This official practice assessment is there prepared by Microsoft, which is just to give us an insight into what the exam look like. Let me just add a note of warning at this point that the official practice test um, is not it's not the difficulty level that you have for the exam. It's just to give you like what the exam look like. The exam is way more difficult than what you see in the official practice test. In my experience, I think I saw just 2 questions from the official practice test in the main exam. So but just have an idea of what the exam is going to look like. And then you also have YouTube resources starting from my own channel where now the thing about this exam is that they are not going to ask you what's Microsoft Fabric, mention the experiences you have with Microsoft Fabric. No, they are just going to expect that you have actually get hands-on from a little detail as df equals to file data table dash dash. They will ask that type of detail. So and this kind of detail you can only know how to use them if you have actually laid your hands on Microsoft Fabric projects. There are a lot of projects and resources out there, but if you don't dig deep very well, you may not necessarily be able to uh, see all the resources that is available to you. So I encourage us to check this YouTube channel for hands-on experience. I have a structured course on Microsoft Fabric on my own YouTube channel. We will get to add some hands-on um, sessions on Microsoft Fabric. So we're just going to be checking as many resources as possible, and then I'll talk you through how you can make use of these resources. Then there is Amit Shandak, so then there is PySpark. So let's just go through it one after the other. Please don't hesitate to stop me to ask any question as fast as possible. So to prepare for the exam, apart from the career page, which is here, where you have everything related to the exam, or everything related to building a career around it, where you have your cloud skill challenge. So most of these links are sort of interconnected in a way. You can just click on this from the career page to get to cloud skill challenge, then the learn together session, and exam cram. Some are paid, some are free, and the practice test. And also if you want to schedule your exam, you can do all of that, and every resource that you need around building a career in Microsoft Fabric. So if you are taking this certification, there are a number of roles that are associated with it, from the analytics engineer to a data analyst, a data engineer, and also a data scientist. So now we are on the data on analytics engineer view, where you can see all the fabric items that a analytic engineer will be working with mostly. And if I change this to a data analyst view also, of course, you will see that the ones that a data analyst will be working with are the one highlighted in blue. And then the same thing for a data engineer, basically. So whatever our career interest is, as far as fabric is concerned, you can actually work with any of the fabric item to get that. So that's just about that. And then also there are blog posts that you can read on Microsoft Fabric. You can access them from this career page. There are user groups. So if you go to blog posts now, you will see blog posts on various aspects. For example, one of the resources that was released, I think, in the course of the week is task flow. And task flow is just to showing us that like a visual representation of the flow of all the items or your workflow in Microsoft Fabric. So some of these blog posts are written by Microsoft MVPs, people in Microsoft Fabric team, and then talking about various features that have been added. And of course, one interesting thing I saw during my exam is that even features that are added newly, they are asking questions on them. So it is not just enough for you to say that, oh, you know Power BI. Yes, Power BI has always been, but interestingly, there are features that came after I started using Power BI that they are already asking questions about. For example, a feature like field parameter in Power BI, there are questions around it in Microsoft Fabric. So in the certification exam rather. So and if you say that, oh, you know Power BI, but you are not aware or you are not up to date as far as the feature is concerned, you will be shocked in the exam session where you'll be seeing questions around new features and new updates that is happening within um, Microsoft Fabric. So on this blog post, there are a lot. For example, now this task flow came to public preview just 2 days ago, and then this person has already written an article on it. So it just gives us a visual representation of what Microsoft Fabric is going to be for the workflow process. So that's another, you can just go through it to have an insight into what a task flow look like. So just something like this where you can assign various items of your Microsoft Fabric into this task flow. Let's say you are collecting data first, using maybe a pipeline or something to your lakehouse and all of that. So it's a workspace feature. So and that is what task flow is all about. So on that blog post, there are several other technical contents that you can go through for every session, CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment. Continuous deployment. So that's all really on career page, but career page is just that one single entry point for everything Microsoft Fabric, from resource to career to preparation for exam to blog post and all of that. This is another tab where you have your community event and support. So that's all for career page. So I'll go through the next resource now, which is the learning part, which is the official learning part. Just like your PL 300, you have learning parts and then all the various aspects of it. Now, typically, learning parts are divided into 4 sessions and the focus area of the exam. Now, at a glance, they are telling us that it's an intermediate level, but from experience, I've come to realize that sitting for mental fabric exam, I would say that having DP 900 and PL 300 is a prerequisite, because by the time you add those two certifications together and add little things here and there or some other topics, then that will give you what Microsoft Fabric is all about. So for people that want to take this exam, either you're a data engineer or a data analyst, then you can take this exam. So this is the official learning path for Microsoft Fabric Analytics Engineer Associate exam. So on this page, you see all the items that you'll be creating and all of that. Then you can see Git-based source control. For people that are coming from engineering background, that may not be too difficult, but people that are from Power BI background, then Git-based control is something you want to pay attention to. And then, of course, the languages. I talked about structured query language, DAX, and PySpark. So then the SQL they are going to be talking about is advanced SQL, where you'll be writing CTEs, that's common table expressions, you're writing your subqueries, you're writing your window functions from row norm to dense rank to rank, and all other Windows function, lag, lead, and all those things. So they ask questions around it. So I don't expect that you are sitting for this exam and you have not been to this page already. So you need to just go through this page and then you can see the module for each part of this exam. And of course, you have the link to the official practice test. So these are all the modules that you have for this exam. So if you can click on this continue course and then you will see the breakdown of each module. So now, like I said, some of the modules are overlapping. So on this introduction to end-to-end analytics is not um, exhaustive really. So, but before I continue, let me give you this caveat. Official documentation is not always enough. It just give you like a full stretch of information about the certification you are writing. And they are not going to be asking you the kind of question that you will see in your knowledge check section. So they are going to be asking you technical questions. You are assuming a role of a fabric analytic engineer, and then you are going to be deploying solutions using Microsoft Fabric. So it is important that you just read this and then take your mind off what you are reading and put your mind in real world scenario. Think of a situation where an organization is trying to use Microsoft Fabric the first time, and then they need to deploy Microsoft Fabric in the organization. From the moment of purchasing the licenses to when you activate Microsoft Fabric in your tenant. So that's how I want you to think, because the exam is about 59 questions Out of that 59 questions, there is a case study part that is about 10 questions. And I think the case study carried the most mark. Then the remaining 40 questions are just general questions around all the various aspects of Microsoft Fabric exam focus. So the case question is just going to give you a scenario of an organization that is trying to deploy Microsoft Fabric. They will tell you their current data infrastructure, the assets, the number of users, and all those things. And then from there, they will ask you how you are going to approach deploying Microsoft Fabric for that organization. So there is not really nothing much under this introduction to end. Then we have the Administer Fabric section, which is where they talk about the various administrative effort that you do. That is where you set up your control panel and the admin rules. So all these ones are not really something that you should dwell too much on. Was how do you deploy assign role to people within Fabric tenants? And like for example, workspace role, is it a admin role, a member role, or a contributor role? One question I remember around assigning role and in Microsoft Fabric is using the list access rights. Which of these roles are you going to assign for this use case? So those are the kind of questions that you should expect. Nobody is going to ask you that, okay, which of these is not a role for a Microsoft Fabric workspace. Of course, we all know that we have member, contributor, admin, and not all viewer. We know there are four. But then, which of these will you think will be appropriate looking at this security situation for this particular person? So these are the kind of questions that you should expect. So it is important that you understand the role and then the rights and privilege and the access rights and access level of each of the roles in Fabric workspaces. So apart from the admin, we also have the ingesting data part. So when you are ingesting data, you can ingest data with three main item. Either you're using your data flow gen 2, which is essentially your Power Query, or you are ingesting data from your pipeline. So these are the things that you are going to use. For example, they can ask you a question that which of these are you going to find most appropriate in using in ingesting your data? Is it a data flow or is it a data pipeline? Or do you want to have a situation where your data pipeline and your and your data flow be in a pipeline? So those are the kind of things. You want to use just a data flow without adding into a pipeline. At what situation or instance will you add a data flow into a data pipeline, or you now link your data pipeline into maybe a copy activity in your pipeline? So those are the kind of questions that you should expect. So beyond knowing that okay, there is data flow gen 2, which is essentially your Power Query, you also need to understand the use case for each of these items. So I believe that then importantly also you should take all these exercises that you have in them. For example, if I open on this exercise now, there are tutorials that you can actually check that walk you through what you can do. However, for now, from experience, I've noticed that sometimes there are actually glitches for some of these tutorials when you are doing them in Microsoft Fabric tenants, especially developer tenants or Microsoft trial, because for no reason you just run into some errors and then when you try again it just works. So if you are trying out some of these things, they are approximately 30 minutes. So don't be in a hurry, even though they say 30 minutes, just take your 1 hour and take all the exercise that you need to take. So some of them, for example, now someone was asking in the course of the week why a path file is not showing. So this file is the default folder, but when you create another folder within it, then it's have a slash name of that folder. So if you don't take these exercises, you will not know that there is a difference between when a file path ends in a file and then there is a folder or there is a subfolder inside of it. So it is important that you take all of these assessments and lab sessions for each of the modules that we have in Microsoft Fabric. So also another aspect that we have is ingesting with Spark and Notebook. So ingesting with Spark and Notebook is also there. So one very interesting one, I really recommend taking the exercise when it comes to Spark. I remember they asked a question that, for example, now for people that are coming from Python background, uh, when you want to see maybe like a summary of your data, maybe you can do df.info, df.describe. However, within Microsoft Fabric, there is something called inspect. So once you try and visualize your data and you click on that icon, it just gives you that summary without necessarily having to write any code. So it is important that you actually take this live session, because doing the documentation alone is not enough, but being able to work with this session and take the exercises. For example, it's a file part now. If the file name is different, it may be a bit difficult. And then if the file type we are trying to load is different, so you need to pay attention to some of these details. And those details can only come from when you take part in some of these assessment. But beyond what is we have on this assessment, there are some other ones that I'm still going to show us as we progress in this session. So that's for PySpark and ingesting with PySpark. And then lastly, like we also have ingesting with your data factory pipeline, which is what we dwell on in our last meetup, where we actually talk about using metadata driven pipeline. So we talk exhaustively about that. And then one of the popular questions, in fact, I say about 4 to 5 questions on data factory pipeline, where they ask about the different use cases for your copy activity. As we know, copy activity is for bulk copying, where you don't need to do any transformation. So let's say you are designing a pipeline where you have a copy activity, you want to copy like 10 million rows of data. So I remember one question just now. You are trying to copy 10 million rows of data. Are you going to use a copy activity in a pipeline, or you are going to use a data flow? It has been said that data copy activity is more suitable for a bulk data ingestion. So in that case, your answer is definitely not a data flow gen 2. Even if data flow gen 2 is your option, a notebook is an option, copy activity is an option. Definitely, we know that copy activity is what you should use. So it is not just important that you know that, yeah, there's copy activity. You should be able to know which one to use per time for each of your use cases and what you have at hand. So that's another module. Then other modules that we have now is more on the Power BI side. So now there is the lake house module. So yes, on lake houses also, lake houses is just like a story. Somebody asked a question in the course of the week that is trying to understand how one lake is different from lake houses. Now, I think a lot of resources are out there, especially on YouTube, on how one lake is different uh, from lake houses, and people from the community have also answered that question. Now, one lake is just one storage, a universal storage for everything you are going to see in your Microsoft Fabric environment. But within your one lake, there could be several lake houses within various workspaces. Why one lake is just like your OneDrive on your Office 365. One lake uh, one lake is that central storage also for Fabric environments, where you can store your structured data, unstructured data, and within that one lake, you now have a lake house that is sitting. So lake house is like a dumping ground where you just put in your raw data, and then from there you can now ingest and transform your data as the case may be. So that's what a lake house is all about. And then you could also find question on how lake houses are different from warehouses. The only thing that is different between a lake house and a warehouse is that on a warehouse, you have already modeled data, and you can use your SQL query language to actually explore and interact with your data. Whereas on your lake house, you can also use your SQL endpoint, but also your data is also made available to it's also made available to your notebook, where you can use it to do your data cleaning, your data transformation, or even you can do your data science workload. Maybe you want to build your model. And then another use case that I can think that I remember just now is where they ask about you don't want to create a copy of your data. And then one thing that one link has actually tried to address is the duplicating data in your environment, having a duplicate copy of your data in your environment. So within your one link, you don't want to have a duplicate copy. So a lake house is going to take care of that. So if you have a copy of your data, let's say in your warehouse, and you also want to like have a data science workload on that same copy, then you can actually create like a shortcut, or you can create a cross data query within your lake house. So lake house is more flexible than a warehouse. Whereas a warehouse is more structured and give you more of SQL syntaxes and functions that you can use. You can use SQL syntaxes on your lake house. So I think I made a video comparing a lake house to a warehouse. So you can check that out also in some of the videos I've made in the past for Microsoft Fabric. So other modules now after here are focused on Power BI data modeling, which is just the backbone of Microsoft of data engineering really. So then we have the Mendelian architecture. I also made a video about Mendelian architecture. Mendelian architecture is just a structure that is moving from the least data quality to the highest data quality. So as you move from each of the stages of the architecture, then you quality of your data improves. And then we have three phases in your Mendelian architecture. We have your bronze layer, your silver layer, and then the gold layer. Your gold layer is the production ready layer that people can use to do their analysis. So you can actually check the exercise too, and I also have a video on it. So the official documentation, the official practice test that we have, they are done the Mendelian architecture with your notebook, where you just use a notebook to prepare your silver layer and then your gold layer eventually. But in the course series that I did on my YouTube channel also, I had actually demonstrate how to create a Mendelian architecture using data flow gen 2. And during that hands-on session, we give you an insight into how a data flow gen 2 is different from a notebook activity. Then another instance is that notebook is actually more suitable when you are trying to handle large data sets. When you are trying to work with a fact table that have millions of rows, you don't want to use a notebook because there are, again, performance implications of using notebook. Even though the documentation has said that they have unlimited data handling capacity, but from experience, we already know that notebook handle that data sets better than a data flow gen 2, which is your Power Query online essentially. So apart from the Mendelian architecture, so I'm trying to go through all these module one after the other, but in other ones where we have overlapping content, I'll just scan through them and then we can call it a day. So please feel free to ask me and stop me if you have any question at any point. By just raise your hand, then I can just speak, or you can drop your question in the comment section or even in the chat right here on Teams. Then we have the Spark session too, where they actually explain between a data table and a packet format. So a data table and packet format. Then they talk about various aspects of data table and packet format. How are they different? We should know that Fabric is a data technology. Fabric is based on data format, and that is an optimized columnar structured data that is more optimized. And then I saw questions around direct lake mode. You know that for those that come from Power BI background, we have direct query mode and import mode. However, we know that when you come to speed, you want to go for import mode. When it comes to size, privacy, and security, you want to go for direct query mode. However, direct query can also be slow. So how do you then bring the speed of import mode into the security and the size of direct query? And that is what direct lake mode is addressing in Microsoft Fabric. And that is only possible because the data structure in Fabric is data lake technology. And then you can have your packet file that you can easily convert to data tables. Are you together, please? Am I too fast, too slow? Please just let me know so that I can slow down. All right. So basically, that's just about it. Please make sure you take each of these exercises and recreate them for yourself. That's the only way you can actually have hands-on experience. Because reading through it is not just sufficient for exam. It's going to be a real hands-on exam. So that's for Spark and Apache Spark technology as far as the exam is concerned. And also, we now have Data table, I already talked about that. Then get started with warehouses. Now, one of the questions they ask around data warehouses is optimizing your warehouse, monitoring your warehouse. For example, they talk about dynamic dynamic views, DMVs, dynamic views, how to actually monitor who is running which query on your warehouse, who is spending the most who is spending the most resource, who is using the most query, which query is running over time. For example, one question I remember right now is that they asked that you have a data warehouse where you had used a DMV, which is dynamic view, to monitor a particular query. And then when you check the DMV for that query, you realize that the query is running and then it's aborting, it's running, it's aborting. Then what is the implication of that? The implication of that is that the compute that you have provisioned for your Fabric tenants is actually low compared to the workload that you are using. So what you need to do in that case is that you want to increase the capacity of your Fabric tenant. So those are, they actually talk more about this, secure and monitor your warehouse. So which they just talk about them briefly under this official learning part, but the details of all these are going to be shown in the course of this session when we get to the product documentation. That one gives us an insight focus on each area, on each worker workload within Microsoft Fabric. So that's just one thing I want to highlight when it comes to data warehouses. Then we also have load Fabric into a warehouse. Yes, just like we know that when you want to ingest data, you use your data flow into your pipeline and then your notebook. But there are some other ones when it comes to data warehouses, like you can use your T-SQL to actually ingest data into Fabric environment. I know you can use your sit-has statement, which is create table as. So again, it's just to make sure that we don't have data redundancy and data duplication within your tenant. So you can use your T-SQL. I think I made extensive video on sit-has statements, or your setter statement that you can use to ingest data into a Fabric workload, a data warehouse workload. So also, apart from that, I think we are almost done with this official documentation for Microsoft Fabric. We also have understand scalability. Yes, this is the part where we talk about Power BI. So that is why people that have done um, Power BI certification before have a little bit of edge compared to somebody that is just writing Fabric exam for the first time. So scalability means that yes, we know that we are working with 1,000 rows of data now, but we know that there are tendencies for that 1,000 to go to 100,000, to go to uh, 1 million, to go to 10 million, to go to 100 million. People work with 100 million of data, and I've, I've laid my hand on 100 million data. And of course, every optimization, um, every optimization things that you can do will actually matter, from not creating your calculated column to disabling your auto date and time. They are actually going to matter when you are working with 100 millions of rows of data in your environment. So this talks about modeling best practices mostly. So let me just click on it so that we can see what is there. So they are talking about how to implement modeling best practices, configure your large data sets, your star schema, and all of that. For those that have a Power BI background, it's actually a walkover. And this data modeling is just the layout for data engineering, because whatever you are doing, you want to know that there are facts tables, there are dimension tables, and the type of dimension tables. And that's one area that the documentation is actually very silent on. They will ask you, they will not ask you that mention the type of dimension tables. No, that's SEDs. Nobody's going to ask you the type. We know we have type 0, type 1, type 2, and type 3. So the questions that I faced, in fact, I think I saw about 5 questions when it comes to SEDs. They are asking questions around what type of dimension model are you going to create in this use case. For example, type 0 slowly changing dimensions, that they are dimensions that they don't change at all. Type 1 are the one that change, and then you replace the latest one with the new one. Then type 2 is where you replace the old one with the new one, and then you still keep the copy of the of the old one in the same row. Then type 3 is that you have a different column for the new data. So they are going to ask questions around which type of SCDs are you going to use in this kind of scenario. So they are going to create scenarios for you. So it is when you understand the various type of the slowly changing dimensions that you have for your dimension tables that you'll be able to answer that kind of question. So then you will talk also about data modeling mostly. Um, Type various relationship and cardinality. You have your one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, and all of those. So those are not particularly new for people that are coming from Power BI background. Yes, another very big area for this exam is optimizing Power BI performance. Now, this area is important for an analytic engineer or a data engineer because definitely your job role is going to be making data available for the end users, for your consumers. Your consumers can be a data scientist or even a data analyst, but you are going to be worried about optimization. So in that case, they ask extensive questions around external tools, even internal tools like performance analyzer within Power BI, or external tools like Data Studio, external tool like Tabular Editor, and then BLM. I can't remember the full name of BLM right now. I think best loading whatever. So those are external tools that you may want to check out. So beyond just what is on this documentation, Dark Studio, you can check maybe YouTube resources on Dark Studio, how to use that video, the use cases for Dark Studio. So one use case for the question I remember now when it comes to this optimization is that you have a Power BI report, and then that Power BI report, uh, the report used to render in about 2 minutes or less, but now it's taking about 15 minutes to render. Then, in what order how are you going to optimize this report? And then you see options like, okay, you go to performance analyzer, and performance analyzer, uh, you run that performance analyzer, you copy out the dash query, then the result of the performance analyzer is going to inform what you are going to do. Is it the dash query that is taking the most time, or the visual rendering, or other things within the output of a performance analyzer? So if it is dash query that is doing that, then you have to copy out that dash query, take it to Dash Studio, and see how best you can optimize it. For example, they ask questions around creating variables in DAX. You know that when you create variable for your DAX, it is more optimized and easily readable for both the machine and you as human being. So when you have, let's say you are trying to calculate year on year, percentage year on year, then you want to calculate the previous year, then you have to declare previous year as a variable, and then current year too as a variable. Then when you want to do your percentage year on year, then you are saying you should return the current year minus previous year over previous year, as against having to loop everything in a calculate function. So optimization is one very big area. Question around DAX model, DAX Studio, Tabular Editor, and performance best practices. Then on Tabular Editor, they focused majorly on things like how to optimize your row level security, setting up your row level security, and object level security. How will you set it up? So you can actually get into the lab if you don't have Tabular Editor. I know there are two types of Tabular Editor. There's Tabular Editor 2, which is the free edition, and Tabular Editor 3, which is the paid version. So either case, there is always lab for you in your Microsoft Learn platform, where you can just have a clue, because they're going to ask you that what are the steps you are going to take, and that those steps is in the exact order you should take them. It's not like you are copying your dash query out first before you turn on your performance analyzer. So even though you know it, but if you don't know the order those actions should take place, you don't necessarily get those questions right. So very big area. I think a lot of questions come from optimizing your data, because who wants to wait for 15 minutes to check your report? So you need to optimize it, and everything matters, and then enforce model security. So that is all for the official learning part for Microsoft Fabric exam. So beyond that, also we have class A challenge, which is what I participated in to get the voucher for this exam. So this class A challenge, also some modules in there are very similar to what we have in the official learning part, but there are some areas where they talk about some things than the other. You see that essentially it is almost the same thing, but there are some parts that they didn't check. So for the part that you already know about, you just jump and then you move to the next aspect where you need uh, more knowledge or more exposure about it. Either case, you are going to cover the learning part that way. So let me just close this tab so that I don't get confused myself. Then the learning modules. Okay, so this learning modules is another very big area. And then reading this resource just once is not just enough. It's not just enough. Now, when you go to Microsoft Learn, at the side where you have a filter where you can filter based on role or based on product. So when I went there, I realized that there are some modules that are in Microsoft Learn module that are not in Cloud Challenge or in the learning part. So, and these are all the modules that you have. There are some of them that are not there. For example, now, let me look up for one module that is not there. So, yes, this is data wrangler is not in any module, though this exam is analytic engineer focused, but I still see some modules around data science, even though you can use Microsoft Fabric for your data science or real-time analytics. Zero question on data science, zero question on real-time analytics. It's just data, Power BI, engineering, data pipeline, workflow, and all those. Those are the things that you have in the module. So there are 2 pages. So some of them you have checked through them before, some you have not, but then just ensure that you check each of these pages and see which module you have. And then some of them they have a different layer compared to what you have in your learning part. In your learning part. So you can just go through them. Then this one, for example, now just goes like a video of preparing for this exam. So you can just check them and all of that. So um, I think there are more pages there. Preprocess with data wrangler, dynamic reports in Power BI, semantic reports in Fabric, and all of that. So you can see that there are a lot of modules. Some are what you have actually gone through before. So don't be scared or be deterred by the number of hours you are seeing. Once you click it, you know what you've read before, and reading them again in a second place might just be what will help you to actually assimilate what you need to assimilate. Then this is the second page to where they talked about various other things that you need to know as far as Microsoft Fabric is concerned. So this is the so far the richest source when it comes to learning anything on Microsoft Fabric. So we have gone through the learning part, the cloud skill challenge, and then the learning modules on, and then the last one, which is the product documentation. Now, when you log into your tenants, there is when you are trying to switch your experience somewhere around here on your Power BI, you know that we have experiences, you have a Power BI, data factory, and all of that. There is this product documentation. Everything as far as Microsoft Fabric is concerned, you can find it on this documentation page. And then the approach to this page is that it is product focused. Everything on Power BI, you find it here. Everything on One Lake, you find it here. Everything on Data Factory, you find it here, and on like that for each of your experiences. For example, now, one big area that you will not necessarily see elsewhere, and this documentation is especially useful when you are trying to like deploy Fabric in your organization, or you are employed and then they are trying to look into Fabric. So if I click on see more, then I have a page, and if you have the data, you can even have it as a PDF. You can see that everything that you want to know about a shortcut is here. You have your overview page that talks about what One Lake is, talks about getting started with One Lake and all of that you can see. And then in between also each of these tabs, you have various assessments. Some tutorials that I've made, I made them out of the fact that I went through this product documentation and then I thought of use cases that can come out from real world. So you want to connect to maybe from ADLS, that's Azure Data Lake Storage, to Azure Data Brick. You want to ingest data from Azure Data Brick. Then they talk about shortcuts, everything you need to know about shortcuts, integration with AWS, Amazon S3 buckets, using shortcut APIs, and all of that. You have open access. Then now you can integrate your One Lake with any of the Azure services, maybe those that are already using Synapse Analytics, those that are using Azure Databricks and all of that. So everything as far as One Lake is concerned, you find it on this page. And then in between there are tutorials. Then the billing too, because let's say you have exhausted the the storage capacity of one lake that comes with your tenant. You can actually see how to go about it here. So apart from one lake, let me take the one for let me take another experience, for example, so that it makes more sense for us. So let's say we are on data factory, on data factory. So I click on see more, and then from there you can see everything that you want to see. So there are tutorials also using data factory. So you can see using data factory, then you have tutorials under data factory too. So all the tutorials that you see here, beyond what you can see in your learning parts, you can see how other things that you can do. You create your pipeline, transform with your data flow, and then automate notifications. So these are everything you want to know about data factory, at least to get you started, even though there are some more advanced concepts that you will find in between. Then you have migrate to data factory. You can see migrate to ADF using data factory, connector continuity between ADF and data factory in Fabric. You know, data factory has always been existing as a service on Azure portal, but we now have it in Microsoft Fabric because Fabric is now a software as a solution. Then you can see all this, then you see the tutorial. So if you go to this tutorial section aspect of it also, you can see uh what how you can actually use data factory, the architecture, the tutorial you're actually going to be using. So this module one talks about creating your data factory, then you can follow all the steps, then prepare the presentation of steps that you are going to take to create your data factory and create your data pipeline. And then the progression, you have to do it in the order it is done because you cannot start from module 2 without doing module 1 because there is a sort of continuity. And then by module 3, after you set up your pipeline, you're already talking about how to set up notification, how you can now use your Outlook activity to add it to your copy activity. So in this kind of work use case now, you know that if your copy failed, then you can set up an Outlook activity to get notification. And the same thing you also have now. For example, now if you are going to do this documentation and you see that what you had work on is with Outlook activity, you can lay your hands on and try it with Teams activity also. So, and then some of the expression languages are there. So, for those that are coming from SSIS background or they have been working with data factory before now, are not exactly new to expression language. Expression language, I didn't see any question on expression language, but expression language is something that you can also use. It's very similar to Power Automate expressions too. So where you are just doing clicking on parameters, variable functions, and all of that, and then user defined variables and all of those things. So those are things that you can do with this documentation. And then let's say you are working in data factory, and there is documentation for each of the activity and each of the connectors. So you see these are the connectors you want to copy from Azure SQL data source, you want to copy from um, data factory, or you want to copy from Dataverse for data coming from what's it called? From Power Platform background or data flow connector. So these are all the connectors. So if you don't know how to use a particular connector, for example, let's say you want to copy from S3. So this is overview how you set up your connection and all of that. Again, Mental Fabric is very new, and then nobody is an island. Everybody still have to go back to your connection. So these are all the connectors that you have, and then this is your data pipeline. These are all the activities. You can see how each of these activities are used. For example, now for someone that has not used a if condition before or a method activity, you can actually check any of them. So let's say checking a lookup activity, for example, which is one thing I use in our last module. So if I go to lookup activity, then I can see documentation on how to use a lookup activity. And this is the lookup activity. Then they will guide you through what you should do. Now, what makes it interesting is the fact that after reading how a lookup activity is used, then you now begin to think of real world scenario where you can actually use a lookup activity in combination with other activity. You know that on your pipeline interface, you have a copy activity, data flow activity, notebook activity, get meter activity. So there's a documentation on each of these activity. So that is now we are already talking about real world. This is beyond the scope of the examination, really. But if you really want to get into it and understand how all of these things work, you have them already. For example, semantic model refresh activity. I've been trying to think about the use case for it in real world, I've thought of something, but just to have time to sit down and use it is what I've not been able to try. It's actually new activity. It does not even exist in data factory, but it exists in data factory within Microsoft Fabric. So for people that are setting up data from on-prem, you want to set up your gateway, you want to set it up that is refreshing and all of that. So you can actually use this semantic model activity that, okay, once a data is loaded in your semantic model, which is essentially your data set, then you want to add the semantic activity to your pipeline and then use it that way, and then you can begin to have the limitless knowledge of Microsoft Fabric and Data Factory. So these are all of them. Again, this activity is very new. It's less than 2 months old, and like I said, there are questions on new updates. So it is important that we also follow up with the updates that are coming in Microsoft Fabric. So then you see your data flow too, you see tutorials and all of that, and then some other things that you see. You can see all this how to do this, how to do that. So it's just a detailed documentation about data factory. So the same thing goes for each of the experiences that you have in your fabric environment for all the experiences and all the workloads. So I can always go back to where I'm coming from. So it is important that you again it's important that you know how to even navigate through this documentation. And I believe that the more time you spend with the documentation, the more you know how to navigate and get your way around it. So if you go to Synapse Engineering too, you have a detailed documentation about it. I think I want to just go through the data warehouse. Data warehouse. So on data warehouse too, you have all the tutorials that you have how to do this, how to do that on using T-SQL, using data factory and all of that. So again, I then mirroring database is also a new feature that they talked about. Mirroring is mirroring your database. For example, you can mirror your Azure database now. You can also mirror your Snowflake database. So then you have your cross database query. You see these are some sample SQL code that you can even see. If you even go to let's say query your warehouse, you can see Visual Query Editor, you can see Visual Query Editor, how to use it. Some of them are even animations in case you don't want to watch video and all of those things. Creating your SQL view, how to generate SQL view from your Visual Query Editor. If you don't want to write a join, or how a merge is different from an append and all of those things. So and then the limitations too are also written there. So using SQL and all of that. So detailed information that will help you in preparing for your exam and the kind of questions that you are going to begin to see. So this is a CTAS statement. No, okay, this is a create view statement actually. And this is another one where you are doing this is like a joint statement that is generated by you that was generated uh, by your visual query and all of that. So detail then how to migrate to from maybe people that are already using Synapse Analytics and now want to migrate to Microsoft Fabric warehouse. So if you want to do that, there is documentation for it. And then pay attention to these monitor warehouses. I talked about using capacity, using monitoring using DMVs. Then there's another one called capacity metric app also that you can use. So I actually check through all of these things. Then there's like a app, like Power BI app. You know, when you put together different Power BI reports, then as a collection, they are presented as an app. So you have an app also that can give you insights into your capacity units, your duration, your query, and every activity that is happening within. So these are one of the ways that you can monitor your warehouses. Then apart from that, you can also monitor using DMVs. DMVs are like system defined functions that you can actually execute in your SQL. For example, now if you do select all from this system exec section, it's going to give you the list of all the sessions or SQL that are running in your warehouses. So this one too is going to give us active sessions that are running, so you can see the duration and all of that. So those are some of the ways that you can actually monitor your data warehouse. So from this page, you have a detailed overview of each of the experiences, each of the workload. So by all means, I encourage you to actually go through this product documentation. It is the most comprehensive, really. Even the problem that you cannot think of and it's being updated regularly. So it is the most comprehensive, and the problem you cannot think of also, they can actually come on here. And they didn't ask any question on Synapse, data science, real-time analytics, or data activator. But again, if you're going to be a fabric developer, it's important that you check through the documentation of each of the workload and experience in Microsoft Fabric. So, again, feels like a lot. Even talking through it, we spent almost an hour. So I can imagine how much time it's going to take. Anyway, next week is Microsoft Fabric birthday. Fabric is going to be 1 year, May 23. It was announced. So if you want to do cake for us in the community for Microsoft Fabric, a Fabric team cake, it is much uh, very welcome. So any question for me? Let me check the chat. And if you want to speak, maybe you can raise your hand and then unmute yourself and ask your question. All right. Can we all see my screen, please?
I see it. Yes.
All right. Thank you. So let me just continue. Let me continue with what we are doing. So I already dropped the link to this repository in the chat. So we've just talked about just these official documentations. Then we still have the study guide, then official practice test. So yeah, let me just open this study guide, which is like your exam syllabus for preparation. So on this study guide, anyway, this is a study guide for all Microsoft certification exam, but of course, we are focused on DP600. So the purpose of this study guide is to help you understand what to expect on the exam and includes a summary of the topics the exam might cover and links to additional resources. So this is about the exam, the language, and then the skill that will be measured in your exam. So one major area is to implement solution as Fabric engineer, and all these items are created in Fabric. So if you are looking at writing other Microsoft certification exam, so you cannot just always come here and pick the exam guide for the particular certification you are using. So if it's for period 300 or so, you will find it here. So but this is DP 600. So the skills are plan, implement, and manage solution. So here they talk about SKUs. SKU are storekeeping units, or some people prefer to use the capacity unit. That's the CA unit. So they talk about the capacity you want to use, what capacity are you going to use in your admin portal, the type of gateway, all those things. So that is when you are trying to deploy a Microsoft Fabric for the first time. So plan an analytic environment that is suitable for your organization. And questions from this area covers about 10 to 15%. Then implement and manage analytics solution. Yes, you've created it. How do you control who have access to what? I think I talk about our role when it comes to workspace. Other things that you can do to actually control that is access to. For example, you can share a analytic endpoint. You can give read access. You can give read and write. You can give write access only, depending on your use case. So how you want to configure your workspace, manage your fabric capacity, and so are the kind of questions that you will see under that. Then development life cycle. Now people want to collaborate on projects. Now we talk about, for people that come for software developers, they talk about development phase, test phase, and also the production phase. So there is something called deployment pipeline in Microsoft Fabric. But beyond that, recently there is now question um, on PBIT file or PBIP files. So they are new. They are not even up to 1 year that we have this type of file. But then there are questions around it that, okay, we are trying to do this. Say I'm working on Power BI report, and also maybe Pelumi is just working on that same report, and then we want to collaborate in real time without having to send without having to send the PBIX file back and forth. So, Isabel, I think you can drop your question on the chat on YouTube. I can see your question, so I'll pick it up. Yes, or else if you have access to Microsoft Teams, you can join us on Teams so that I can ask your questions or any of your friends. Check the community WhatsApp page. You will get the link to the Teams where you can actually ask your question. So sorry about that distraction. So they ask questions around PBIB files. That's a continuous integration and continuous deployment. So you can also prepare about that. And then SLMA endpoint too is also part of what you should ask. And then another big area is when you want to prepare and serve your data. You have prepared your data, you have prepared your data. How do you serve it? Well, you've ingested your data. How do you serve it to the end users? How do you take it to your end users? So this part is about 45% of the questionnaire you're going to see. Here they talk about shortcuts, data flow. When shortcuts, for example, the documentation is very thin. But when you go to the product documentation, you see a very elaborate documentation for what shortcuts is. Then they talk about creating your views, creating your functions, your store procedure, adding new columns and all of that. Then your copy data, I already talked about um, copy activity in your pipeline, your data flow into your notebook, schedule your pipeline. Now, one common question is that you want to schedule a pipeline or you want to schedule a notebook. Which of these two will be the most appropriate depending on your use case? So they ask that when it comes to copying data, they also ask which of the activity or which of the routes are you going to use a data flow, you're going to use a notebook. So this gives an insight into what the exam is going to look like. So you can spend a lot of time here because you know it covers 40 to 45%. That's almost 50% anyway of your exam questions. Then transform your data. Which tools are you going to talk about your data? You see now here we are talking about type 1 and type 2 slowly changing dimensions, which they are very thin on when it comes to the learning part. But again, you need to go about and over to actually read more about type 1 and type 2 slowly changing dimensions. So if you have any question, can you please just raise your hand, then I can ask, you can ask that question so that everybody too can benefit from it. Any question, please? So I take it that no question from anybody on this call. So let's just go back and continue with what we are doing. Then optimize. I already talked about tabular editor, dark studio, and all of that. Then in the data tables, why using data table, and then again implement and manage semantic model. Now that you have prepared your data, the next thing is that you want to make it available for the end user. You see, identify the use case for dark studio and tabular editor, choose your storage mode. I talk about import mode, direct query mode, and now we now have direct link mode. How are they different? So you're writing your DAX using variable and functions, iterators, table filtering, and all of that. So of course, by the time you combine your DAX Studio with using iterator, writing variables, you know that you are optimizing your DAX that you are writing. Then the models too, and all of that, low level security, object level security, and all the things that you need to pass. And of course, you're exploring your data set, what are the things available for you to check your data set. So these are all the things that you should prepare of. It is not exhaustive, but then it gives you like a brief insight and overview on what the exam is going to look like. So I think that brings us to the end of the skills that will be measured. So this is like your syllabus that you can actually use to prepare for this exam. Then you have your visual practice test. Let me see if I can take one. Again, this visual practice test is is very easy compared to the exam. And that's not to scare you, but just to make sure that you prepare adequately for your exam. Look at this question now. You have a fabric tenant that contains workspace name workspace one. Then again, your time is going to be enough. Don't rush. The moment you rush, you are most likely going to miss the story or the detail that they are trying to test. They already know that you can create a workspace and you can create a warehouse, but there are some details in between that they want to ask you. So don't rush. And one thing that I do personally, I don't know if it works for everybody, is that I don't read all the options, because when you try to read all the options, they probably will even confuse you further. But if you have the idea or you are very sure of what the answer should be like, read the one that you think is the answer first before you now start reading all the questions, and then you now get confused. Now, another hint is this: a question like this, you see that option one and option two are very similar. You can read them together so that you now see the point where option one and option two are different. It's a very tricky exam, but if you pay attention to detail, I think it's something you'll be able to ace. So definitely, I know that option 3 and 4 are not my answer. My answer is within this and this. Now, to now know the appropriate use case out of this option 1 and 2 will be what I need to figure, and that will come based on the preparation that you have made. So again, these options are very the practice exam is very easy compared to the real exam. So and then if you take the practice exam too, you can always check your answers, and then that will give you more insight. Deliberately I pick a wrong answer, give you more insight. You see now my logic even failed this question. I had said it's between this and this. That's because I didn't read anyway. So this is it. But then you can always click on understand warehouse in Fabric, and then it's also important to go to the assessment because there are some links that are embedded in each question that are not necessarily in all the resource material that was made available. So, but when you read them, they address some of these questions, and then they probably give you like a context into the real question that are going to be facing in your exam. So beyond just taking this assessment, try and check the answer, read the details explanation that was provided, and then it will give you. For me, I think I take this assessment for about 5 times, if not more, before I went for my exam. Even though I know that my exam is going to be way more difficult, but because I was able to understand the context behind some of the questions, then it's that kind of helped me in preparing for my exam. So, so let's just continue with the resources that we have available. So again, YouTube resources that I also used include my YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Also, apart from me begging you to subscribe to my channel, of course, you are definitely going to learn, and then some of these things that you want to read. Now, it's already a short time, especially for those of us that are watching from Nigeria and are going to be using the voucher, which is going to expire by June ending. It's already a short time to go through all these resource material. But I can bet you that if you check some of this YouTube channel, um, it's going to give you like a crash preparation for the exam, and then you can have an insight into hands-on session with some of the sessions. Then also on Oyinboke's channel, there are some other fabric resources. I remember when it was first announced June last year, Oyinboke and I had some Twitter spaces where we explain each of the module, and that was before I had my own YouTube channel. But then the recordings from those workspaces are on Oyinboke's channel, where we take all the modules one after the other. I think it's 10 series for that playlist where you can see each of the work experiences that we talked about. Then which channel, beyond the I create channel, I also check other people's channel. Will has been doing a great job with Microsoft Fabric. Some of us know him already. I think he has the most video on Microsoft Fabric right now. So he also has a website where he's making videos, and he also has a playlist on preparing for the exam. Then I'm Chanda to Microsoft MVP is an Indian. So I know that some people may not like Francis but like Oyinboke. You may not like Oyinboke but like Francis. As the case may be, what is important is that you should pass your exam. So you can use this YouTube channel to actually crash prepare for your exam. And then again, I have this playlist that I used. I'm not a Python developer in preparing for my PySpark part of the exam. You know that the exam is focused on three languages: SQL, DAX, and PySpark. So let me just open this particular playlist. Though this playlist, the PySpark was taught in Azure Databricks. So, but I was able to follow through. I don't have access to Azure Databricks, at least not for now. I was able to follow through using notebook in Fabric. So all you need to know how to do is to just to get the same resource material that they are using, and then you can follow through with your Fabric notebook to learn this Spice pack. So this is the playlist. So on this playlist now, it can
Hello
get you started.
everyone, welcome to Nitya Cloud Tech.
It can get you started on PySpark. So how to load data in your PySpark using your data frame, defining your schema, then how to read your data type, either your CSV file, your package file, or your data tables, how to remove rows, filtering rows, remove columns, and all of that. Adding a new column, then handling missing data, missing value, PySpark tutorial, how to use your aggregate function. Interestingly, when you are going to this PySpark tutorial, especially for those that have never learned Python, approach it with the mind of you are trying to do data preparation with Power Query. You know, on Power Query, what you do essentially is to rename column, remove null, add column, do a join, do your merge. So that is what you are going to be using PySpark for as far as data preparation is concerned. So just approach it with that mindset, and then that will help you. So, and if you look at this playlist, you can see that this one is just to load. That's when you are doing your df.csv, df.package, df.data. Here it talks about the data type, either it's a CSV file or a data type or package file. So it is actually PySpark within your Azure Database, but then you can use your notebook in Fabric to follow through, because there are not too many tutorials on PySpark out there. But I was able to use this one. I think in less than, it's about 2 hours content in total, and then aggregating, maybe you are doing your sum and all of that, then your join, you can join data frame, which is like your duplicate or merge operation in your Power Query, or you can remove duplicates, like remove duplicate rows in Power Query, sorting in Power Query, every other thing in Power Query, then the conditions, adding conditional column and all of that. So that's the mindset you should use to approach this PySpark, and then that way, if you are able to follow through this playlist, I bet you all the questions on PySpark will become easy for you, and even all the PySpark codes that are in the tutorial, you'll be able to understand them better than you just copying the PySpark code from the Microsoft there and use them. So it will make more sense to you, and then you'll be able to understand it better. So that's what I used for preparing for PySpark. And then Microsoft Learning Session. This is official website prepared by Microsoft. It's a series. Particularly not a fan of this live series because it's more of talking than hands-on, and it's just like you just going through this resource material. So if you want to get hands-on, but well, some people are connected to this resource better than some of us, but it's not really recommended. It's just about talking. But you need to get hands-on to be able to get it. And then from some people that are prepared to read, you can follow this person on LinkedIn. Abu is one of my mentors. He's one of the enterprise DNA instructor. He had a whole course on DPS 500, which is now retired. So, and he has been making some playlists on, I said playlist, some newsletters on Microsoft Fabric Analytics Certification exam. So he's well experienced. He has about 20 years of experience doing data. So you can also connect and follow him on LinkedIn. He's a very good guy. If time will allow, maybe I can even invite him to come into our community and present. But I'm afraid he's in Pakistan, so the time difference may not allow. But I'll talk to him and see we can actually how we can actually bring him on board so that he can share from his wealth of knowledge with us. So he talked about them, break them down beyond the language that we have on Microsoft Learn. So you can subscribe to his newsletter and then get it. Again, learning can be active and passive. So when you read content like this, you won't know when you learn them, but you have actually learned them. And also, if you are familiar with DP500, you can also use DP500 material or even DP203, which is Azure Data Engineering, to prepare for your exam. So all of these resources are available. So on this GitHub repository, I will be updating it as possible. Once I lay my hands on new resource I wish I had used for my exam preparation, I will also add them and keep updating them. So you can share this GitHub repository with other people, and then I believe that with this, you should be ready for your exam. So I think that brings me to the end of all these results. Again, I've been preparing for this exam for almost 1 year since it has been announced. I think from the second day it was announced, I was able to make a project. So I know it can be very overwhelming, but then just take your time, prepare adequately, and I believe that with hard work, and if you also believe in God, God will help you to pass your exam. So, any question from me before we call it a day for about the exam, about anything on Microsoft Fabric? So, if you have any question to ask, you can just raise your hand so that we have other people that are also on YouTube can hear us. So, I'm checking the chat if there's any question that is dropped. Okay, so yeah, Isabel has dropped a question. In the ingest data with Spark and Microsoft Fabric Notebook module, can you this thing is not well written. Maybe you can edit it. In ingest a data with Spark and Microsoft Fabric Notebook and notebook, can you do a bit of light on purpose of V-order and optimize with data table? Yeah, V-order basically is just to optimize data table in your Microsoft Fabric. So V-order basically will just give you an insight into if the capacity you are using is sufficient to actually take care of your workload. For example, now there are various capacity units, the least being F capacity, and then the highest being F 128, F2, F4. I'm not sure. There is F32, F64. I think there is F16 too, up to F64, up to F 128. So each of these capacity have like their power and the compute that they can use. So this V order will actually give you an insight if the capacity that you are working on is sufficient to optimize. And then when you write this optimize in data table, it just gives you an insight into if that table is well optimized enough. I really don't have much details about it, but I believe that if you go through that product documentation, you will see something more on V order. And then again, when you are writing your exam, before I forget, there is actually Microsoft Learn module. It's just like an open exam. As you're writing your exam, there is Microsoft Learn. However, you being able to use Microsoft Learn while you are writing the exam is dependent on how familiar you are with Microsoft Learn. So you just have like a tab on the side where you can just quickly ask the question in the exam on Microsoft Learn, and then all the results on that particular question will come around. Again, an open exam, if you are not careful, is going to waste your time. And the only way you can actually make use of it is if you are already familiar with it, and then you will be able to sift through the important information that you need for your exam. Yeah, then Abdul Hakim is asking about PBIP. I'm not sure if that is a question, but PBIP is a file format. Again, before now, what we have is PBIX. That's the file type for Power BI file. You know that Word document is dot docs, that's dot docx, Excel is dot xlx, PowerPoint is dot ppt, Power BI is dot PBIX. But when we are talking about continuous integration and continuous deployment, when you want to collaborate on your project, that's when you have your PBIP. You can save your file as PBIP file, so that means that you can actually upload it to a GitHub repository on a GitHub or Azure DevOps, where people can now collaborate on it nearly time. Instead of, oh, you are done working in your on your PBIX file, you send the PBIX file to me, I work on it, I send it back, then we don't have to do that back and forth. So we can collaborate on our project and work on it at the same time. Now, this kind of solution are more interesting when you are using DevOps in your environment. When you're using DevOps in your environment, basically. So it becomes more easier to use PBIP file. So any other question, maybe from previous meetup or our last meetup? If you have any question, you can just raise your hand, then unmute yourself and ask your question. So another person is asking question. So let me just pick the name. That's Arolo Lalekon. Thank you for your question. So he's asking, I currently use wheel page. I'm planning to complete my answer on your channel, but at what point do I need to check the documentation? Now, I think personally, I prefer that you read the documentation first. Then, when you read the documentation, you check the answer. So, when you now check the answer, that will now give that, okay, this is what this person was, this is what we were trying to explain. Then when you are now through with the hands-on, you can now go back to the documentation again. Then that will now put the documentation in proper perspective for you. So you can use both of them hand in hand. For example, now, if you are watching Mendelian architecture on my channel, with the one that you have on Microsoft Learn, then it now put some of these things in perspective for you. And also, I also try to do that Mendelian architecture using data flow, which you are not going to find it anywhere on Microsoft Lane, but it's just to like bring you from your familiar terrain to an unfamiliar terrain. Most people are used to Power Query, so that's why I had to do a medallion architecture with data flow first, which is what you understand. Now we now do it again with notebook. So documentation first, hands-on, go back to documentation. Most of these resource material that I didn't use them just once. I use them multiple times. The one that I use one, I'm not sure that it's one that I use just once. Most of them I use them more than one time, two times and above. So that's how I prepared for this exam. I think everybody is actually mic shy. Nobody wants to unmute and ask any question. So any other question before we call it a day, and then from next meetup we pick it up. So how many people have registered for the exam? People are writing the exam this week. If you have registered for your exam, let me know. Okay, I think Peter Hans is up. Is it up that you registered for the exam, or you want to ask a
Yes.
question?
I want to ask a question.
All right, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate how you had given us heads up on how to prepare for the exam. But my question is, I would like to know how the exam, since you have done the exam, how is it structured? I know that it's not just about option multiple answers or the likes. How is it structured? I would just want to know so we can mentally prepare for, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we don't need to do. I don't know. I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
And you confirmed that for to read through, we should start on documentation before we do the hands-on, then go back to documentation. Am I correct? Is that what you meant?
Yes, yes, that's correct. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Rita, for your question. And
All right then.
that's a very brilliant one. So for the exam, there are different types of questions. There are just multiple choice where they ask the question and then they give you a list of options. And then there are another a question type where you have which of these two options they can give you a list of like 5 options, that which of these 3 options are correct. You have a point for each of the question that you take. That's another type of question. And then the other type of question that you can see is that in what order are you going to take this step? Say for example, you want to publish a Power BI file. How do you publish a Power BI file? The first step is that you save it, you click on publish, then you select the workspace, and then you publish it eventually. So that's another type of question where you just do a drag and drop in the order you are supposed to take those steps to get that solution done. That's the third type. And then the fourth type of question you are going to see are the ones that talks about the the use cases. They just paint a scenario for you. That one is 10 questions. You don't even skip it. Now, I don't prefer anybody to start with those type of questions. I actually prefer that is the last because they are use cases. They are going to paint a scenario. They can just say Rita collectibles or Rita home of version. They have this data environment, this is their content environment, this is what they have. They have 50 report builder, 50 report consumer, what type of license they are currently using, pro license. So they will just give you like a story, a background of a fictional organization, and then from that story, then they now ask you questions about that story. That okay, based on what you have read, what type of license do you think will be appropriate? What type of workspace role do you think you would give this kind of person in this environment? So for type, multiple choice. That one you have option A, option B, option C, option D. Then another type of question I forgot is that yes, you see questions that talk about that they write code for you, and then they will just miss like a part of the code and then give you like a drop down then you now pick what is supposed to be there. For example, you are writing your calculate function, then you want to do a previous year, they can just write calculate total sales, comma, then blank, a drop down, then you now have maybe your date column. So in that kind of a case, you have a drop down that they will put maybe date add, dates previous year. So just pick like a drop down to sort of complete the code. The same thing when it comes to Spark or even your SQL. So I saw something where they ask how are you going to complete this SQL code? Maybe you have like maybe like a dense rank or rank that you want to skip um, the ranking. Here you use your dense rank, you use your dense rank. So you have to complete some part of the code and just use like a drop down. So five type of question: the multiple choice, the one where you complete a code using a drop down, the one where you arrange the order of things of steps you are going to take in solving something, and the use cases, and then the one that where you have multiple options. That out of these five options, three options do you think are correct? So that's that for the question. So thank you, Rita. So you can drop your hands now. So Abdul Hakim, I think you also have a question. Your hand is raised, so you can ask your question now. Unmute and ask your question, please. If you are talking,
Okay,
we
good
can hear
morning.
you.
Please confirm
Yeah,
if you can hear me.
yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for everything you have been saying. I really appreciate. But my question is, there was a part whereby the whole how the question is going to be asked in terms of 10 to 15%, 40 to 45%, like the breakdown. So as someone that you have done the exam, do you think Microsoft will do that breakdown of the 10 to 15% and 40 to 45% in terms of how the question was asked? So that's my first question. I've actually forgot my second question. So when I remember my second question, I'll come on Mr. and ask again.
Okay, thank you. So the simple answer is yes. They follow that percentage of question that they want to ask, where they talk about the plan, prepare and serve data, implement analytics, prepare your environment. So in that same book is the way they actually ask their question. So pay attention to the ones that actually have more percentage or that contribute more to the weight of your exam.
Okay, I've remembered the second question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you mentioned something about the case studies and multiple questions. So, and you mentioned something that you don't pay for the case studies to come before the other questions. So, is it something that if I see the case studies in maybe like at the beginning, is it not possible for me to skip the case studies and come back to it when I have enough time to read through the whole stories and be able to answer it, or as the questions is coming, I have to answer it. There's no way for me to skip and come back to it.
No. What they said is that you can go back to it, but after I finished my question, you still have the chance to review all the questions that you face. You can go back to them, but it's gonna be very overwhelming. Imagine that you are reading like 2, 3 paragraphs first. And why those questions I actually don't like them is because after reading 2, 3 paragraphs, then you are answering a series of questions. You probably have forgotten what you read in that place, and then it's kind of personally, I don't know if it's just me, it's just bring down this morale and energy that I have to answer that question. But yes, you can decide not to answer it, but then when you are now doing your review, you can actually check over again to check and adjust your answers. And then you're also going to get like a summary at the end of your exam, the number of questions that you answer, the one that you answer, and then they will confirm if you're ready to uh, to submit your exam. So Joseph, I think your hand is up, but before you follow on show that I think your hand is up, but before you go, I have one question on the chat. I noticed the module are focused on data factory, data engineering environment, following the learning live playlist and lab exercise module. Is it fine if I focus on that for the exam? Yes, you can, but they also ask question beyond that. You know, again, this is fabric analytic engineer associate exam. The focus is more on the engineering side. But if you are familiar with Power BI already, I think you can just focus on it. But beyond that, they are still ask you Tableau Editor, Dask Studio, data modeling questions, Dask questions, and all of that. But if you already know that you are solid on those areas, you can just focus on data engineering side of things. So, for sure, if you still have a question, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Francis. Yeah, thank you for the head up. I really appreciate it. Well, I don't really have questions. I want to contribute to Akin question on whether you can answer question or you can skip question.
Yeah, go
So I
ahead.
think for case question, I'm not really sure you can skip it because based on my own previous experience with Microsoft exam, case question is always kind of compulsory. I think they are like 8 questions or something like that. So they are always compulsory and you have to make sure that you first answer them before you can even proceed. So just prepare your mind that the case question can be kind of bulky, just prepare. You have to read like a lot of story, like a comprehension and also, but I don't think you can skip it. So just prepare your mind for that.
Yeah, thank you. And that's true. So the only part you can actually review it is when you are done with the exam completely, and then you are going back to it to actually um, check all the answers that you've picked. So any other question before we call it a day? And if you have any other question that you might remember, you can go back to the session where it's also streaming on YouTube, which is going to be available immediately after we are done now. So I get because some people learn better listening than just reading. So you can go back to it and explore all the resources that you have at your disposal. And you have any other question you want to ask, you can drop them in the chat. For those that are on YouTube that are not on the WhatsApp page, you can message us on Twitter to get you added to the WhatsApp page. So you can also be on Teams and then you can ask your question live. So again, thank you everyone for this opportunity. I believe that again, how many people are registered for their exam? How many people are writing their exams soon? Okay, Yusuf has registered. Who else has registered? Who is writing the exam soon? Okay, okay. Destiny too has registered. I hope Destiny you are not scared. Arrow too has registered. Yeah, all right. Thank you. So please, I wish you the best in your exam and I wish you luck in your exam. So I'm expecting to see more education and fabric certified analytics associates in the community. So we want to have a community where when people are looking to get people to set up fabric in their organizations, then we are recommending people from here. So that is the level we want us to be. So thank you all for coming, and then we see again next month. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you very much.